Welcome to Bite Size Bios. This is meant to be a mini-sode that will accompany HDTH. Every week, I will pick a person from history and dive into their lives. All right, welcome back to another episode of Bite Size Bios, BSB. This is episode number 31 coming at you here. We're talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We're going to learn a lot about her. We're going to learn that Ruth is not her first name. But before we get to that, as always, this is the mini episode accompaniment to HDTH. We have to go back before we go forward. We have to talk about last week's episode. And if anybody here listens on a regular basis, you know that this episode was actually kind of late coming out. It was supposed to be out, I think, this past Monday. Just ended up not coming out. I think we'll be coming out actually on the Monday afterwards. But yeah, I just want to kind of acknowledge that before we get moving forward. Things happened and it wasn't able to get recorded. But yeah, so get back to the past episode before we get to the current one at hand here. The last episode was episode 73, Watergate. The Watergate Hotel. It to me that was one of the episodes that I prepared for the most. I think in all of the How Did That Happen so far, which is, it's 73 of them. I'm also learning what are the better ways to prepare and how to get more prepared, if you will. I watched so many movies and documentaries about Watergate up until recording that episode. And truthfully, I was saturated. Doesn't even begin to describe the level of information that I was holding on to at that time. I don't know if it helped or not, because you end up you learn so many tidbits, you get so much, and then you can't call upon it when you need to. As you forget all the little fun facts that you had. Or you write down so many that you're just like, you're just browbeating people with information that's at a certain point. But I'm not sure. That being said, I'm not sure what else is there much else to really mention that I didn't get into the Watergate episode that I feel like is important. I think the biggest thing that I learned, the biggest takeaway, was that the break-in was not really the biggest, I guess, part of it. Like, it was really just, it showed how much corruption that there was in that administration. And I thought that was interesting because I feel like it gets focused on so much, but in reality, there were so many other parts to it that had to take place. And just, we're talking about the Pentagon Papers, we're talking about the White House plumbers. There's just so many things, because of course the plumbers are the ones who went into the hotel. But before that, they, were breaking into psychiatrists' offices and talking to lobbyists and trying to get them to flip their stories. There was a whole thing. Just an administration that's built on corruption. I think to me that was the main factor in all of this. But what gets focused on is some guys broke into a hotel in D.C. There's just more to it than that. But I don't know. I hope you guys liked it. I don't think there's, like I said, not much else I really wanted to say. I thought the White House plumbers was crazy. Or just awesome, really awesome when because you don't root for like bad and deceitful things to happen, but if it does, you want them to have a cool nickname, and you want it to be something, and it definitely is. If you guys get a chance to look deeper into the White House plumbers, man, it is worth a deep dive, a YouTube rabbit hole. It's out there. The interviews are out there. But yeah, like I said, nothing else really to mention before we get to the episode. Hope you guys like this one on RPG. Sorry, it's a little bit late. But yeah, as always, if you want to give us a like and subscribe wherever you hear this, 5 stars if you loved it, 2 stars if you didn't. Tell us why you didn't love it, because constructive criticism is always welcome. Yeah, HTThappen.com for all the extras, at HTThappen for all the socials. And yeah, without further ado, as we know to do, here is the episode.
I do think that I was born under a very bright star, because you think of my life. I got out of law school. I have top grades. No law firm in the city of New York will hire me. I end up teaching. As I said before, they gave me time to devote to the movement for evening out the rights of women and men.
Joan Ruth Bader was born on March 15, 1933, at Beth Moses Hospital in Brooklyn, New York City, that is. She was the second daughter of Celia and Nathan Bader, who lived in Flatbush. Her father was a Jewish immigrant from the Ukraine, which at the time was part of the Russian Empire, and her mother was born in New York. She's a New York native, born to Jewish parents who were from Poland. The Bader's oldest daughter, Marilyn, died of meningitis at the age of 6. Joan, who was 14 months old at the time, was known to the family as Kiki, a nickname that her sister had actually given her for being somewhat of a kicky baby. So Kiki, who knows? But when she actually started school, basically Joan and her mother realized that there were a lot of other girls there named Joan, so they just decided to have her go by Ruth to avoid the confusion, which I guess people do. They couldn't just, because like in my day, we would just be like Joan A, Joan is Joan F, but let's just change. So her real name's Joan. And her real name is Ruth too, but her first name is Joan. Joan Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We'll get to the Ginsburg in a little bit. And so her family was Jewish, but not really practicing Jews. Really, she was not. Ruth was not actually allowed to have a bat mitzvah ceremony because of the Orthodox restrictions on women from reading the Torah. And this was said to be one of the reasons, among others, that she was not that much of a practicing Jew in her later life and throughout her life, but she just always felt that certain parts of it were restricting to women, and she just didn't want to really be a part of it. She would go to the camp Chinawa, which was a Jewish summer camp in Minerva, New York. She would go there almost her whole childhood. She started at the age of 4 and went there up until she was a camp counselor at the age of 18. After graduating high school, she attended Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, and was a member of the Alpha Epsilon Phi sorority. While at Cornell, she met her future husband, Martin Ginsburg, at the age of 17. She graduated from Cornell with a Bachelor of Arts in Government on June 23rd, 1954. I'm not sure when her husband graduated. She would actually go on to, so from after that, they would move to Oklahoma because he was actually in the ROTC, I suppose, at Cornell, and so he had to go serve his time in, I don't say exactly what he did over there, but he basically said it was during the Korean War. He ended up being a tax attorney, so I doubt if it was anything that related to that, but yeah, so basically they were stationed in Oklahoma for a little bit. While she was there, Ruth Bader Ginsburg worked for the Social Security Administration office, and she was actually demoted from her initial position because she became pregnant with her first child in 1955. Her and Martin is his name, they would go on to have like 4 kids, and to me it was somewhat interesting to hear what her kids would end up doing. One of her kids runs a music label for classical music in Chicago, and I'm just like, I couldn't have written that better if I was just trying to guess what RBG's kids do. And the other one, I think, I think she's a scholar of some sort. Oh, she's a teacher. She's a teacher at Columbia. I guess I was pretty close. So then she would have her first kid in 55. She would actually enroll in Harvard Law School in 56. Be one of 9 women in a class of about 500 men. And this is kind of wild. I'm sure people probably said this before, but the dean of the Harvard Law School would actually invite all the women, all 9 of them, to his house for dinner and literally ask them to their face, "Why are you here taking the place of a man?" Like, that's ridiculous when you think about it. It's just that that people would just have the audacity to really even ask that question. Like, I don't know. So that's just, she had to go through stuff like that. She would end up actually leaving Harvard Law and going to Columbia Law, and graduating from there. Not sure why because her husband got a job in New York City, so she had to move from Massachusetts to New York. But yeah, so that ended up making her the first and only woman, I believe, to be on 2 major law reviews in history. Of course, the Harvard Law Review and the Columbia Law Review. And of course, in 1959, she would graduate Columbia Law School, tied for first in her class. She'd have some issues finding employment right out of college, right out of law school, because of sexism. Basically, people just did not want to hire women to work in the sort of environments that she was trained in. She was rejected by multiple judges for clerkship. She ended up clerking for Judge Edmund Palmieri of the U.S. District Court of Southern District of New York. And she only got that because her Columbia law professor basically like threatened the guy to be like, hey, if you don't take this one, I'm going to stop sending you good candidates. And if she's actually defective like you think she is, I'll replace her. And so so on that, he hired her. She worked there for 2 years. After that, she would go on to teach law at Rutgers Law School. She did that for a few years, I think about 10 years or so. Mainly taught civil procedure. From that point forward, she would actually, let's see if I got it. She would get promoted. Oh, I think I had it here. I thought I had it here. Her first actual promotion to judge, I believe, was in the 70s. Let me see if I can get that right here. Excuse me. Well, it was actually in 1980 when she was confirmed by President Carter. But it's interesting to know why she was able to do, or why they were even looking for more judges. I didn't know this, but was it in 1978 Congress passed the Omnibus Judgeship Act, which basically gave, I think, 117 more judges at the federal level. At the district level. We're still talking like federal court, but 30 and 35 at the circuit level. So, and they wanted those positions to go specifically to women and people of color, minorities. And so that's kind of what the initiative that made more space for her. She was confirmed to be on, the DC circuit in 1980. And she was served there for about 13 years. And the only reason she left that was because she got confirmed to the Supreme Court. And this was done in 93 by Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton did that. Let's see, I'm not sure which number. I think was she the second female on the Supreme Court? No. Maybe the third. Oh, she was the second. Yeah. Okay, so there've been a total of 6 altogether, and 4 of the 6 are currently on the bench right now. She became the second female Supreme Court justice in history. She would go on to serve there, for about 25 years, give or take. That will bring us to actually her health, which of course is what was eventually her demise. In 1999, she was diagnosed with cancer for the first of 5 times in her life. Specifically, colon cancer was the first one that she got. People asked her to retire a bunch of times throughout this. She got cancer, like I said, 5 times throughout the next 22 years. My math is way off. Because she would actually die in 2020, so 21 years from her first cancer diagnosis. She would actually end up dying. She died from complications of pancreatic cancer at the age of 87. Her husband had been dead for 10 years by that point. He died in 2010. I forget exactly what of. But yeah, that's pretty much her life. Pretty bite size. She I think she was the first woman to lie in state at the Capitol, and the first Jew to lie in state at the Capitol as well, which I thought was pretty interesting. She was buried in the Arlington National Cemetery beside her husband. All right, and that was another episode of Bite Size Bios, BSB. This one was about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I hope you guys enjoyed learning about the notorious RBG. With people like her, you can talk about their accomplishments almost ad nauseum. It almost becomes, I would just say, rather monotonous, just to keep saying, "Oh, then they did this decision, and she wrote this brief, and she was on a lot of stuff. Almost to the point, where it's just too much to even. You have to pick and choose what you can talk about. Well, like I said, the main takeaway fact for me that I thought was just pure RBG was that one of her sons runs a classic music record label, which I never even really thought about that those even existed, but I guess they do. I guess they have to. And if you're wondering who runs it, it is one of the kids of RBG. But yeah, so that's it. Of course, we got another episode of How Did That Happen coming down the pike here next week. Not much else to say. Give us a like and subscribe wherever you find this. 5 stars if you loved it, 2 stars if you didn't. Tell us why you didn't, because constructive criticism is always welcome. Like I said, HTT Happen for all the for all the extras, and at HT Happen for the socials. We'll see you guys next week with another episode of How Did That Happen.